Hi everyone. Hi. Sorry that we're doing this. I'm still learning Zoom, so I appreciate your patience. Certainly recognize all the names attending, so thank you for attending. I'm Beverly Carter, and we have a nice day planned. Is there something sharing or live thing? What are we doing? We're not doing that today. Okay. Okay. All right. We're going ahead. All right, I just need to get rid of boxes. All right, so today I'm Beverly Carter. I think all of you know who I am. I'm a notary, and I have previous experiences which I use every day. It helps me in the work I do, not just from a legal perspective, but also from the personal perspective. I bring a very practical approach. I have multiple roles in my life. Mom, wife, daughter, sister, aunt, all of those things. And we love our dogs. So we have Sumo as part of our family. This is the current picture of my staff. So we have Vicky on the left side. So Vicky is, we're calling her the apprentice. She's been accepted into the notary program. And Rachel, who's a legal assistant, me and Kayla. And then we have Alicia, who is also here. She's here as a summer co-op student. She's in the Gustafson School of Business at UVic, and she's helping me with business needs, including marketing and things. So it's one of the reasons why I'm able to get this done, because I have help. A couple housekeeping things. So use the chat item, the chat option at the bottom. If you have any questions, I'll take a look at them if something comes to your mind. There is a Q&A option at the end. And if you find this valuable, please share it with family or friends. We will also be posting these on YouTube. And so they're available to listen to afterwards at a person's leisure. So recent topics that I've talked about are wills. I've talked about do-it-yourself versus having a legal professional do your wills. Today's topic really ties in with having wills. We talked about powers of attorney, health, the representation agreements and advance directives, and other matters related to health. Hot off the press, we are now able to sign wills remotely. So I am setting up I'll be setting up some sessions probably for next week. About signing wills. We had been able to do Zoom interviews, but we had not been able to witness. We can now, either as a notary or a lawyer, we can now witness wills by video, which is interesting. But there are some restrictions in and around that. And I'm also going to be talking about cohabitation agreements. So I'm going to be inviting a family law lawyer, but this applies to so much more than just family law. Parents and kids buying a house together, things like that, you know, having a good agreement in place. So stay tuned. The topic today, so a lot of you would have gone onto the website. This is just our Lunch and Learn series. We're talking about estate and emergency planning workbook. You want the description, go read it there. But you'll basically get all of that and more today. We're going to talk about the legal documents you need: will, power of an attorney, health representation agreement. Particularly, the focus is really making sure that your appointees are in a position to step in and act with ease. So, AKA make their job easier. This also includes if you had to step into your own life. So it's, you know, I'll talk more extensively on that. But sometimes our own life comes up with some curveballs and other events that, you know, planning for that matters as well. We're going to have an interview with Steve Newton. He has a long career as an emergency management specialist in our province. He is also my brother, so smart guy.
I'm being blackmailed to be here, just so you know.
Yeah, right. I don't know who he is. And then we're going to do some practical emergency preparedness tips with Vicky. She belongs to one of the Saanich, the local chapter of emergency preparedness as a volunteer, so she's got some good tips. So it kind of all works together about planning for the unexpected. The idea I had came to me probably about 4 years ago, and I thought about putting together a value-added document for my own client, but through the passage of time, I realized that I have some unique perspectives of, of either stepping into my own life or stepping into somebody else's life. And also I run a business, you know, so I have to think about, what if all my systems go down? What if I go down, right? What are my backup strategies and stuff like that? And so it's really a whole, it's really a whole culmination of life. I say to people, I have 3 PhDs in life. And so that all comes to play here today. And I'll talk about the document I've prepared as we go along, but it's really about keeping track of your own, everything that you have, but it's also having to keep track of somebody else's. So these are some of the tools that I use, right? I use Keeper, and I use LastPass. And these are great because they help me remember logins. They help me remember what's my personal login, because it might be V Carter 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Who knows? I can never remember passwords. I have hundreds that I have to remember. And also as a notary, I have many that are frequently changed. These are some of the tools that I've used. But I also have some limitations around these because they don't cover everything that I need. And so I'll give you an example on the next page. This is in my Keeper, and I'm going to say 100% recommend it because I use it daily. I look in there for things that I just don't remember because I don't always have to access certain things every day. But you'll see here, you have evidence of my Microsoft 365. Well, that's business related. SkyDrive, don't ask me, that's old. Mom, and my brother will appreciate this. I mean, I had to step in and act for my mom. And sometimes you'd be asked for certain information or having to access an account or do something, and it wasn't top of my mind. I didn't remember what her social insurance number. So if I were to click that arrow, I would go in and I'd find things like that. I needed a central place to be able to access things on short notice, because I'd often be out doing different bits of business and these things would come up, and I learned through time to use my Keeper as a tool, but it still wasn't enough for everything. But then you've got things like the Nespresso Club or Netflix. Those things are clearly personal. So, but it's hundreds. You know, a lot of these will have sub files within them and stuff. So it just gives you an idea of what I see. Check it out. It's worth every penny of it. I do a yearly subscription. There are many tools. So this is really about keeping ourselves organized, right? What other ways do we keep ourselves organized? We can use a spreadsheet, a Word document, a piece of paper written down, our memory, an address book or a notebook, and or do you have a filing system for paper? So what this talks about is there are many ways that we try to keep track of all of our online self. We have a very strong electronic presence these days. And as we've evolved really over the last 10 years, I mean, did we even have iPhones 10 years ago? I'm not sure, maybe just, you know, and the tools and apps and things that have become available, we have a really interesting lifestyle now. In the days before, we all had paper statements coming in monthly from our bank. We had address books, right? Life in some ways around our personal businesses were a little less complex. But now we can sign on and do our genealogy site online and pay for that. So we have this whole online presence that doesn't marry up with having that information anywhere. So these are all the types of things I kept thinking. This is all going back to the idea, I need a central place to hold everything. So there are the various roles that I've come to identify. There's me, and I've alluded to that before. I said, what if I flush my phone down the toilet? And I'm not admitting to this, but I might have done that once or twice. I've certainly dropped it in the ocean. People currently stranded during COVID. Have you moved? Do you have a blended family, or are you blending homes, right? Sudden health or other emergency things that come in place in your own life. This is you. So I know I was just desperate when my, thanks, he's laughing. Quite desperate because when my phone went down the toilet, I was at a loss for like 3 days. I couldn't remember I couldn't access my keeper. I couldn't remember, there were a lot of things I couldn't do, and I barely got by, and it was very stressful. More recently, stranded during COVID is a real issue. We've certainly had issues around people, like there was a couple stranded in New Zealand. They were on total lockdown just over a month ago, and they were unable to get out to see a notary or a lawyer there to sign documents for the property that was selling in the Lower Mainland. They didn't have a power of attorney here. So, things happen. So it's one reason you should have a power of attorney, because we never know if we're unable to attend to our own needs. And COVID is probably the biggest thing, the biggest aha for all of us, that we should have all of our documents in place. Have you moved? And I'm going to say, this is one that I've experienced. I run a business, I run a lot of things, and I moved 1.5 years ago. But prior to that, I had sold my house and I'd moved in with my now husband. We blended our family, we blended our homes. And so we had a mix of his accounts for hydro, the phone. I didn't have that information. And, we've been together now, living together. It was 9 years ago that we moved. There are still separate things. And I still don't know what the hydro is or the phone. I'm still not on those accounts. And so I'm just saying, if I have this, there's a lot of people that will have this. So if, moving, you might move from one district to another. So you have different utilities. You might have a different gas provider, those sorts of things. So these are things that can happen. Or if you have a sudden health or other emergency, who's going to step in and help you out? So I see people all the time, individuals who have often strokes, rather sudden, quite serious, and somebody really does have to step into their lives. And in some cases, you're able to, you haven't lost your capacity, but you're really, really sick. But what if you do lose capacity? So then you're stepping into their role as a power of attorney. So that's where you step into their life, you do what they would do for themselves on a day-to-day business. But when you step in, how long are you going to be stepping in? Is it short term? Are they going to be in the hospital for 4 to 6 weeks? Or is it 6 months? Or is it a permanent change? So we never know when we're going to have to shift gears. And I imagine a number of you who are on the call, we've all had some substantial life experiences. I'm sure all of you can think of somebody where you've seen this become an issue. Either they didn't have a power of attorney, or if they did, you didn't know where to get started. Very stressful when you're not sure. And then, some clues that you might be needing to help people out and start gathering information as you're maybe helping Aunt Martha out, or your mom or your dad, they're starting to lose their cognitive functioning a little bit. You want to make sure that you're in these roles, that you're starting to gather information and have it central, so that when you really do need to step in permanently, then you've got the information, or you're a long ways along. The best person to find this out is from the person themselves. You already have your own life to manage, but then imagining you're adding a second person into that mix. So when you're suddenly required to act as executor, you need to protect assets. That would actually also apply if you were appointed as a power of attorney. Protecting assets can be protecting it from intruders, protecting it from the elements, winter homes, matter, that you keep things, snow removed, those sorts of things. But which assets? Do you know what these people own? And how would you manage those assets? And what expenses relate to a person's day-to-day? They have credit card, but which credit cards, right? If you have to step, so it's not too bad if you're an executor and you have to step in and manage credit cards. That much is easier. But if you're power of attorney and you don't start managing some of these debts or assets, somebody's their credit, losing the word here, Credit rating, thank you. Yeah, the credit rating can tank if you forget to pay 3 credit cards in a row, and that may impact things like a mortgage. So acting as, is that something? Oh, that was just me. So, you know, when you're executor, what do you stop? What do you start? What do you need to change? Who do you need to contact? Is it people? Yeah, there's people, family, government, businesses, employers, former employers, pension places, all kinds of stuff. So it's no small task to step into somebody else's life. Here's just a very short list of things that you might need to manage in short order. Bank accounts, investments, income tax returns, phone. If a person can no longer use their cell phone, do you cancel the accounts? Do you get mail forwarded? There's a lot of things that may happen, particularly when you need to act on behalf of somebody else, or you need somebody to step in and act for you. So helping them be prepared. So pet care on all your online accounts, and you can all just imagine if your internet just got obliterated overnight, how desperate most of us would be. At least we'd all be in the same boat. So unintended consequences of not being prepared for a personal emergency or somebody else's emergency or loss of life. You can lose photos. How many of us take photos? I mean, we don't have photo albums anymore. You know, what about the life insurance policy? This is an example that a lot of people go, oh, I never thought about that. Well, what if a life insurance policy is an important part of your strategy for gifting, and you know you're sick for a year and then you die, but nobody bothered to pay out that monthly $300 payment to make sure that somebody else got the $1 million life insurance policy. These things will go away. Life insurance companies are not going to be forgiving because you didn't know. And so these are the types of things that you can plan for to make sure you find success and help people to have the life or to pass on what they wanted to pass on correctly and accurately. But there can be things like who would claim your long-term disability if you were injured. You know, who's gonna legally be able to talk to your employer, and do they even know who that would be? So those are the things. So you need the document to give you the authority. Gives you a power of attorney will give you the legal authority to talk to anything or any place that person where they've had business interests while they're alive. The executor status gives you the legal authority from death onwards to be able to deal with all of everything. But you know, income tax not being done would be, home insurance is a really big one. You know, when a person dies, you need to change their home insurance policy to show that it's vacant. Typically it is vacant, but not always. But you need to alert these places and the unintended consequences that you may, if there was a water heater that flooded, you might not be covered, right? So money can just keep flowing out. So this is what I came up with as the value add, and I think it's really important for us all to think in these terms. Think of me, myself, and my estate workbook, because it's all those 3 different angles that we never know whether I need to, you know, figure it out for myself or just keep myself organized for my day-to-day life, or if somebody else has to come in and make sense of my life, either as an attorney or as an executor, then it's all there. So one location. So this is a value added that I've provided, and I think I'm looking at putting together a digital version. So stay tuned. We'll let you know when that's available. I'm hoping in the next couple of months. So, whoops. Okay. So I am going to invite Steve. So I thought this would be very interesting because Steve has had a 30-year career in emergency management, and he's worked in the BC Wildfire Service. So he's done lots around forest fires, but also in the emergency BC, Steve?
Emergency Management BC, yeah.
Emergency, they changed names, and so Emergency Management BC, and is a subject matter expert, has been called to testify in legal proceedings on this. and so has a really ground level view of stuff happens to people. As well, there's some, I'm going to get him to talk a bit of his experiences that he's been called into, some of what he's observed, and he's had a very interesting career. When people have had to pick up and go, he's witnessed that thousands of times, right?
More than I can count, yes.
So Steve, tell us about your career and some of, as I'm talking today, because it's all about personal planning, planning for the unexpected or even the expected, but it's the unexpected that can really catch a lot of us off guard, or if we expect something, we should be prepared and help others. So take it away.
Well, I had the first of many midlife crises in my mid-20s and decided to go back to school and get a bit of an education. And in order to do that, I thought firefighting would be cool, so I got into that game back in 1988 and spent the first little while, about 50 pounds ago, by the way, rappelling out of helicopters onto fires in interesting places and all that adrenaline rush stuff, so it was pretty cool. But I worked my way up through the wildfire ranks into some senior operational positions, incident management teams. So I've seen many large fires. I've seen many homes burnt. In fact, I was flying around. I was the planning section chief on the incident management team, and I was flying around about 20 minutes before the first of the houses burnt up in Kelowna back in 2003. So I got to see 200 plus homes go up and that sort of stuff.
I remember you showing me pictures of that, and it was quite amazing because I remember you showing me the aerial views of all the homes, and not all the homes on the outside were burning, but the homes that had the cedar shakes on, so the fire would transfer through the air and land somewhere on a nice source that would ignite. It's very interesting, right?
Well, and that's just another element of this complexity we call personal preparedness. So there's way more to it than just what we're talking about here today, for sure. But so lots of that sort of stuff. I ran the provincial aviation program for 4 years before having another midlife crisis, I guess, and moving over to Emergency Management BC, which used to be called the Provincial Emergency Program. So I spent 7 years there, my final 7 years in government before retirement as a regional manager here out of Kamloops in the central region. So we're right smack dab in the middle of all the biggest fires and all the biggest flood events that have happened in recent BC history, for sure. So I had a really, really good play on a lot of those.
Yeah, you were in Grand Forks too. You were helping overseeing a lot of the emergency management in the Grand Forks, the big flood. Was that 2 years ago now?
Yep, so that was 2018. So I retired on the last day of May 2018, which I believe was a Thursday. Friday morning, I got my first phone call. 10 o'clock Monday morning, I was in place down in Grand Forks in the Emergency Operations Center, and I set up their flood recovery program, which was an interesting thing because at that point, and still somewhat to this day, there was no legislation that enabled any of the provincial government ministries to support a large-scale recovery. There's a few little bits and pieces and some funding sources for partial remedy kind of things, but there was nothing that allowed us to get in and help over 400 families who had major life disruptions.
So tell us about some of the people that you saw. You would have talked to a lot of people, right? What did you see on the ground, the people, the inhabitants, community?
I talked to a lot of people, and I was talked at by a lot of people. and there's definitely some nicknames that I can't repeat here in front of mixed company, and openly insulted in the town hall meetings and all of that. But that was my job from my perspective, right? Because I was the guy that came in to set up a community-led recovery program.
Right.
So a number of elements of that, but probably a little closer to what we're talking about here were the human needs pieces of this.
Right.
So we had 400 plus families whose homes had either been destroyed or significantly damaged. We had the full range of socioeconomic, from people on social assistance and the elderly with very, very fixed incomes, and substance abuse types of people, all the way up to the wealthy folks with more insurance than any of us could ever afford, right? So the full gamut of everybody was down there. They went through the classic sort of phases of when the event happened, it was exciting, and then everybody was happy and patting themselves on the backs for helping everyone else and all this sort of stuff. And then the reality started to set in, and the shock and the surprise, and then the anger, and then the grieving, and all those natural phases we go through when we have major traumas. They all came into play there, and they were just amplified by 400 plus times however many family members there were, plus that next element of extended family and businesses. You know, there's something like 60 or 70% of the businesses probably aren't going to be going back in to that town from that event, right? So
and then
I saw all of that.
You did, and then there was like the wildfire, lots of devastation up in the Williams Lake area as well. These are we're talking about this because these are large amounts of people being affected, being forced out of their homes, right? And so, how do people manage? Did people hang on? Did they wait to leave? What did they do? Like, were they? Because I'm thinking, did they pack up their photos? What how did people cope? How did they actually cope in these things?
Well, I'm going to suggest that one of the themes in my comments today is going to be around the range, because I saw it all. I mean, there are some people that are well organized, and they are somewhat confident and calm when things happen. So they've got all of their paperwork in a row. They've got all of their photos backed up on the cloud already, and their houses and properties are insured, and they've pre-planned, so they've got family reunification plans, and they've taken the pets out a week or two ahead of time if they can, and things like that, right?
Yeah.
The other end of the spectrum was somebody just panicking and grabbing their snowboard.
Yeah.
Snowboard boots.
Okay.
That was it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So and then
people react different.
Yeah. Well, and they panic, right? And probably even COVID these days, we've seen such a range of reactions to that as well. Fear, paranoia.
And I'm right in the thick of that as well.
Right? That's something you can't really see in the same way that you can see a fire burning, and the smoke coming into the air, right?
Well, so the interesting things about fires and floods is you'll have this range of people that will evacuate. They'll self-evacuate. In fact, they'll self-evacuate before there's any official impetus for them to do that. And then you'll have the others who are going to stay there, and they're going to defend their property and their old barn if it means their life, right? Yeah. And there's quite a few people like that still around the province.
Well, it's interesting when you have to pick up and go. So there's the concept, and you're going to be talking about the bag. So Vicky's going to be talking in a little while about if that happens to you, how to be prepared for that. What should you have on hand? So, but you've also had some personal emergencies in your life. Certainly, you had half your house burned down. A bunch of years ago. So you've had things, and that was a what was the ignition source on that?
That was a wood pellet stove.
A wood pellet stove, yeah. So you've certainly had that, and in and around that same time, I think that was within 3 weeks. We had our dad, so you and I share that experience, and
it was actually within a week.
Yeah. So for some of you who probably don't know, but our dad, just a couple of days before Christmas, fell down. He was carrying boxes down the stairs. And the best that we could figure out is that he kind of did a half step and couldn't right himself because he was carrying boxes and landed on his head. He had a severe brain injury and was paralyzed, and not expected to last much beyond hours. But you were there. You also have the emergency. You've done a lot of
first responder stuff.
First responder kind of things, right? So, I mean, it's a really good example that stuff happens. He was just turned 75, incredibly healthy, should have lived until at least 75, right? Yeah. And how one of the things that really stands out in my mind is how we're like, there's no way he's coming back. But what we did was we knew that we needed to make sure Mom was okay. So we went into his room and we looked through all his files, and we were so thankful that he was so organized, right? And had everything that we needed. And that's one of the things that also makes me had the ideas that, that was easier to step into his life.
I wish he would have organized his garage. That's all I can say about
Yeah,
that.
right. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah. So
So true, right? He was a great guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing, and actually you taught me something good there, because prior to that, I'm reasonably organized, but everything I had was in a filing cabinet in my own filing system, which is
Yeah.
better than nothing, right? But
Yeah.
but when
Yeah.
we went through that exercise of tracking down all of his credit cards and bank statements and insurance policies, and actually anything that looked like it was sort of quasi-official, and we organized all that stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the extension of that was just to do that for mom. So a few
Right.
years later, when mom was ill, and then she finally passed as well, all of her stuff was organized, and it was such a clean, relatively
Right.
simple process.
Right. Right.
And it wasn't a lot of work to do it.
Yeah, I know where I get my organizing skills from. So, but yeah, no, I mean, and I frequently, when I'm talking with my clients, I always talk about my experiences, because that's part of the value that I believe I have.
Yeah.
Because I learned a lot through both of those, because one was very sudden, short term and intense. And then, mother was, Alzheimer's, a longer trajectory, but also, but being prepared to step into her life and manage it when she couldn't. And in the beginning, we let her do what she could, and then in time, it became clear she was a risk either to herself or to be, for people out there to abuse her, right? There might be predators and stuff.
I remember her. She was so proud that only 3 of the 5 dents in the car were hers, or something like that. Yeah, so, anyway.
So I just want to ask your thoughts about. You've had a chance to look through my workbook. Do you have any sort of opinions on that? Because at some point I really want to share it large and wide with people. Certainly my clients will all get this.
So there's kind of 2 things that sort of leap out to me. Number one is I cannot undervalue how good it is to be organized and have things organized, either for yourself and your family, and or parents or loved ones, or even extended family, right? So there's more than a few cases where close friends are people looking after others and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I like that. The other part of it that occurs to me is that there might be a little bit of work up front to do this thing, right? But once you've got that information there, then it's a real simple maintenance thing. Like you might have to change the new credit card expiry date and add the occasional card or delete the occasional card there, or those sorts of things. But boy, once you get into that maintenance mode, it is simple.
Right. Yes. So
simple.
Yeah. So some of the things, just to give everyone an example. I mean, I given some examples of things that you need to do, but personal information, your full legal name. Daily, I deal with people who don't know their name. They may have a first, a middle, and a last, but they go by their middle name because they can't stand Gertrude being their first name, whatever it is, right? Or they have a different spelling of their name. So you are Steve with a V-E-N, Stephen,
yes.
But there can be Stephen with a P-H-E-N, and you probably have found sometimes people will misspell it, and sometimes these misspellings perpetuate over decades for people. But simple things, historical names, maybe you're divorced, married, whatever, what's your birth name? Your driver's license, date of birth, where you're born. These are key things. We've talked, who's your spouse? What is their information? Because, if you have to step into somebody else's life, these are important relationships and information that ultimately you do need to know, either immediately or because you're filling out some paperwork. As an example is when you're called in to be an executor. And this was part of my thinking when I was, giving the information to the funeral home when mom died. I was like, I don't know exactly where grandfather was born in Denmark. Like, I know where he's from. That's not necessarily where he's born. And so and I don't know, because there's multiple spellings of his name. I didn't actually know his traditional name, right? He always went by Bob, but he was Kai Robert, right? So, there are things that, when people, regardless of whether you expect somebody to die or not, or to lose capacity, it's stressful. You know, of we're not always thinking of these things at the top of our heads. And so I think, you know, if we can use this for our own parents or ourselves, right, or our spouses, you know, here's an example, if everybody can read that, some different things that you might need to know: medical services card, passport, social insurance number, do you have a Nexus card that needs to be canceled? These are all things that can definitely lead to identity fraud if they're not properly taken care of. But you know, firearms license, those sorts of things. You know, we'll look in people's wallets was the other one, another source of getting information. But lots of people only have their information on their phone and in their wallet. So, so there you go. So I think I appreciate very much, Steve. Always good to see you. So
I'll invite myself over for dinner next time I'm down.
yeah, that's right. So thanks. I'm going to take you off, and I'm gonna transfer this over to Vicki because she's gonna start talking about her stuff. So
okay, thanks so much, everyone, for your time. Bye for now. Okay, so Vicki, just for clarity here, when Bev referred to you as the apprentice, was this like a Donald Trump kind of a thing that you got going with her?
No, that's because I've just been accepted into the notary program.
Okay, good. That's probably a little better then.
Yeah.
Awesome, congratulations.
Thank
you.
you.
I'm leaving now. Bye.
See you. All right, let me just share the screen back over here. Okay. And I'm just going to pull the chat up. Sometimes my voice does not get picked up well on Zoom, so just let me know if you're having difficulty hearing me. All right, so a little bit about me. So I'm Vicki Helmink. I've worked here for 4.5 years. Started out as a receptionist, now worked my way up to actually becoming a notary myself. So, or starting to become one. Notary in training, there we go. So I was raised by a mom who is very involved in emergency planning. She has experienced a number of evacuations herself, so she became very interested. She helped prepare my elementary school. That's how far back her involvement goes, and even prior to that. So I've been volunteering with Saanich Emergency Support Services for almost 6 years. I've responded to everything from apartment fires. There was quite a significant one downtown a few years ago that I assisted with, and all the way to just single family dwellings with, you know, maybe one family or sometimes suites. I also have assisted families evacuated from the interior due to the 2018 forest fires. So that one, people were relocating down here to be, you know, with family, or they just couldn't handle the air quality in the interior anymore, so they were sent here. So we were providing services through the provincial government. So that has all been very interesting. My own evacuations. So I've also been personally evacuated 4 times from my own home. Thankfully, never actually lost my home or anything like that. In one case, we had a car accident outside of our home, and they actually pulled the power mast from our house. That's how hard they hit the pole. So we had to leave due to the fire risk. I was also evacuated in Haida Gwaii due to a potential tsunami. Again, no notice and little time to prepare, hop in the car and go. Also been evacuated from schools due to a bomb threat because of living on a military base. And we were also on standby due to a forest fire in Chatham, New Brunswick. So yeah, we had time to prepare there. But again, sometimes when you aren't in the situation or haven't thought through what to do, you don't always realize that you should use that time to prepare. So bottom line, you never know why you might be evacuated or when. So have some planning in place so that when that emergency happens, you're not panicking, and you have some resources in place. So home emergency preparedness. So the BC government has programs that will help you for 72 hours in the event that you're evacuated from your home, or your insurance might kick in, but the province can provide 72 hours. However, they suggest being able to survive on your own for 72 hours. Now you think, you know, a house fire, something like that happens, you know, you don't have a house to return to. So that's where the province can step in and help out. But what if we have an earthquake where, you know, the supply chain to the island is affected? So, you know, being able to survive on your own for 72 hours is important. So having some food in place and things like that, that will make your family self-sufficient. So things to include in your kit. I'll give you an example of kind of what we have, at least the picture of what our family has, but some non-perishable food. So something easy, think camping, you know, some canned food, something with a great shelf life. You can get survival bars from Capital Iron that are, I think, like, you know, a day's worth of calories in one bar. So you just need, you know, a few of those per person in your family and you're good to go for a while. They don't taste the best, but they'll get you through. Also have water in place because the water supply is not always guaranteed. If we had an earthquake and pipes are damaged, there could be issues with wastewater intermingling with, you know, our drinking water. So have fresh water supplies. There's guidance on how much you should have per person in your family. Also have a backup supply of your medication. And this is good to have in a few spots. You know, not talking mass quantities, but having a little bit aside so that if something happens, you know, like if you can't go without your medicine for diabetes, you need to have that on hand because you're not necessarily guaranteed to be able to get more immediately. So camping supplies are great for your emergency kit. We have everything from tents to camping stoves. We have tarps, rope, all the stuff that you would camp with anyways. If you've got it around, great to just assemble it in a spot that you can get to in an emergency. Another one, waste management. Don't assume that you'll have a toilet. So it's not the most fun one to think about, but it's important. Also your personal care items, you know, if you have kids around, having some extra diapers, you know, women, our feminine care products, everything like that. And first aid, you know, being able to actually administer some basic first aid for your family. So this is not an extensive list, but it's a start to kind of get you thinking on what you might already have on hand or what you could start gathering to just better prepare yourself. So this is an example of what our kit looks like. So we have this large shed here that is secured with a lock, and we all know the combination to it so that we can access it. And then it's actually divided into a few bins. So the idea of this, that is in theory, if we need to relocate, we can quickly and easily kind of gather up some of these bins, toss them in vehicles, and off you go. They're all labeled and there is an inventory in here. I didn't take a picture of that, but there is an inventory in there. So you can see here we've got a bucket up in the top right. That kind of goes back to that waste management. You've got some tarps. There's all kinds of fun stuff in here. My mom is the one who assembled this, so she knows like the detailed list of everything, but it has a wide range of supplies. So outside of your home, you also want to be prepared in your vehicle. So you think, you know, we live in days where there's OnStar and BCAA, you know, in theory you should be good. But what if you're in an area where there isn't cell phone reception? You know, what if you get a flat tire and are stuck on the side of the highway for a bit? You know, that could be a scary experience. So having a little bit to tide you over until help arrives is great, and it's going to keep you from panicking and, you know, feeling that stress even more. So things like car repair kits, you know, tire patch kits, fire extinguishers, jumper cables, all of those basic. There's some great kits that you can buy and put in your car. And then even a first aid kit, some basic survival kits, like thermal blankets to keep you warm, maybe a small food ration, couple granola bars, anything like that. And then your grab and go kit. So I'll get into that a bit more. I also have a backpack that I take hiking with me that I can essentially leave in my car and be set up. It's everything from some snacks for me and my dog that I hike with, and basically set up so that I could overnight in the woods unexpectedly if I needed to. So the grab and go kit, this one is designed to be kept somewhere so you can basically grab and go, because you can imagine I'm not able to grab that shed and go, you know, mobile quite as easily, but there's a few bins that in theory we could grab, load, and go. But the emergency kit or this grab and go kit is something, you know, maybe it's by your front door. and you grab it on your way out if you can. So this is where, you know, the essentials might be. So things like copies of your identification. So we've seen people who, you know, they run out the door, some grab their wallets, some don't, you know, like safety first always. But if you can have copies or even stored off-site copies of your ID, it'll help you in the long run getting your life kind of restarted after your emergency. This might also be a place to consider keeping your emergency planning book. You know, it should be stored securely given the information that's contained in it, but it might help you kind of re-establish your life. Again, some food and water, you know, even just something basic to kind of keep you going, and a supply of your essential medication. Goes back to that original, you know, have some of that available. And then spare car keys. There's a lot of times that I've responded to a fire and, you know, there's their truck and parked by the house and they end up losing the vehicle as well because they couldn't move the vehicle away. I mean, always at the direction of the firefighters. But sometimes, you know, if you have that spare car key in your grab and go bag, maybe you can relocate your vehicle if it's safe to do so. If you don't have your keys, not going to be able to do that. So what about pets? That's the one that's definitely an interesting one. A lot of people forget to prepare for their pets. You know, during the wildfires, there was a lot of horses that were being relocated. You can imagine, you know, with a dog or cat, it's fairly easy to pack them up, but what if you have a horse to deal with? So having a plan in place for them is great. During Hurricane Katrina, there was actually a lot of people that stayed behind because they couldn't take their pets. So in an emergency, something called the reception center will be opened, and that's where everybody will go to register that they are evacuated. Pets are not typically allowed there, so people didn't know where to send their pets. So we're lucky here on the island that we actually have a team that saw this need and has set up. So you can check them out. They're southislandpetsteam.com, and they have detailed instructions about how to prepare your pet for an emergency. So they'll also go over, you know, having a grab and go kit for your pet and being ready for them and having a plan. And they will actually, in emergencies, they have set up a reception center for animals and will care for animals for 72 hours while you're getting, you know, kind of settled. So I've kind of given you the very brief overview and highlights, but you can actually learn a lot more about this by preparing or by attending the emergency planning sessions. So SANIC, that's who I'm involved with, they usually do monthly sessions. They, you can find out about them through the SANIC Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Program. They're online, and there other municipalities also have similar programs. So if you're not in SANIC, you can check out Victoria or anywhere else to see what they offer. But SANIC would welcome, you know, larger participation as well. So that's kind of all the information that I had. So I will pull Beverly over again, and then we can go over some questions and answers.
Hi, I'm back. Thank you all. Yeah, so I just, the reason I wanted to loop both Steve and Vicky in is to give some real life experiences of that emergencies happened, curveballs get sent our way. Sometimes it's a temporary or a long-term measure, but one of the things that, you know, if you were found unconscious or something, even in an emergency situation, smoke inhalation or not thinking clearly, you should always have trusted contacts and somebody who knows some key information about you or where your key documents are kept. So I just wanted to thank all of you. Is there any questions here? So I do have a question from Heather. So I showed Keeper and LastPass. Are they interchangeable or for different things? What do you think? Similar but different.
Yeah,
That's the best answer I have, right?
Yeah. Keeper, or sorry, LastPass is very helpful for all of the logins. So, I use it personally as well. So it will save, all of my logins for Facebook and everything like that. I don't need to keep track of, the 100+ passwords. And it'll log you in automatically.
Can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. Is that better? Yeah, so Keeper is great for storing lots of information beyond just passwords and usernames. Bev was mentioning, social insurance numbers, and it's much more versatile, whereas LastPass will only store username and passwords, and it will log you in automatically, so you don't always need to go in and look up information. So similar uses, but very different actual application.
Right. So I'm just looking at another one here. So a few years ago, Cindy had a suggestion that there should be a designated contact in your phone prefixed with ICE name. Is ICE an acronym for?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Hadn't heard that one. So that's a good one.
I have heard that one. My family and all have that. So I don't know for certain. I haven't dealt with first responders to know if that's true, but it's not a bad idea to have if it is true and they're looking for it. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as, one of my recommendations, and I had done this with my mom, is, if you're a person who has some risks, you should maybe even on your fridge or somewhere obvious have here's my trusted contacts. It's one thing I'd actually been thinking about was just like having maybe a slightly larger business card that allows you to put key people on. Who to contact in case of emergency, because I think if there is any kind of an emergency, somebody else may need to contact them on your behalf, or you might, we all have these phone numbers, but they're one touch. And, so something like that would actually be helpful. And I still think there's a real role for hard copies of things. Look on tops of fridges and medicine cabinets for names. Now, yeah, the medicine cabinets work if you have one, right? Like I've always told people, if they have a health condition, health risk, put a copy of the health representation agreement there, or any advance directives, at least alert people to the fact, or doctors. One of the things that I thought was a good suggestion that Vicky had was around medications, right? What if you're not conscious and somebody needs to know your medication? There is a page in this for that. And these are the things that we've tried to think about. What might you need to know? And quite frankly, I mean, I'm not on any medications now. That's good. There. But I can't remember those nice long Latin names that they are, or what dosage, right? So where am I going here? Oh, that's right. There. You might need to talk closer.
That could be accessed even from the lock screen, and it was set up to have emergency contacts for myself and also her husband and my sister. It also listed what medication she was on and her allergies. And I mean, her allergies is all paid as in her medication. So, very useful information for first responders or someone who potentially finds her, incapacitated.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think, I'm trying to inspire all of you to plan for your own self, but also plan if somebody else has to come and help you out. Plan for the unexpected, because I've had unexpected in my life 5 or 6 times, and quite unexpected, really hard events, often related to an illness or the death of someone very close. Health, and I'm sure lots of you have had the same. So just being prepared, and that's why I wanted to bring this to you today and let you know that if you are one of my clients, I will be offering the workbook for you, and but I'm also going to be putting it online, and making it digital as well. And so that possibly you can do a downloaded version, so you've got that, so you can update it from time to time, but you also have a cloud version, all encrypted, of course. So we're working on that. So anyhow, no further questions. Thanks very much. It's been great. We really appreciate your participation and watching us through this. And thanks a bunch. So you know where to reach us if you have any more questions or anything. Just reach out. Thanks.